Once you get your design just the way you want it, you shouldn't have to redo all that work over and over again. That's where dynamic web templates come in. They make it easy to create new pages and make updates when things change. And things are always changing on the web. So let's look at how templates can save you time. For this lesson, I've created a special version of the Galapagos Island site. So let's go to Manage Sites, New Site, and load that in from our project files. I'm going to call this Galapagos 07. And make sure you're in your Chapter 7 folder and you're selecting Galapagos Diving. And then make sure you select the Images folder within that and designate that as your default Images folder. You don't need to make any other changes, but you should know that the Templates feature that I'll be focusing on in this chapter only works in Dreamweaver if you've gone through that initial site setup process. So make sure you identify the main root folder of your website before you try to start working with templates, or you'll run into trouble very quickly. When you create a new template, you do it much like you would create any other new file, File, New, but instead of choosing Blank Page, choose Blank Template. Now you can create a template from any existing page, so you could start with a blank page, but there are some advantages to choosing template, and it's just a little more efficient in how Dreamweaver saves that file in the proper location when you're done. I'm going to choose HTML template because we're making static HTML pages. If you're working on a site that uses a dynamic technology, such as PHP or ASP.NET or ASP, you would select one of these options. But for everything we're doing in this series, HTML should be your choice. Now you can use any of these pre-designed layouts in Dreamweaver to create your template, just as you could with any other blank page. But for this lesson, I'm going to start with a completely blank page just to give you a little more details on how you create your own CSS layouts. So let's choose Create. Now you see we have a nice blank page, and really the only difference is up here at the top where you see some editable regions already included in the document. These editable regions are automatically created to make sure that the title area of your document and any other content you might want to put in the head section, which is where you would store some JavaScript information, internal style sheets, etc. This template code makes it possible to change those things on each page created from the template. Always good practice to save as soon as you create a file. Dreamweaver is now going to tell me that this template doesn't have any editable regions because I haven't created any new ones in the body of the page. But that's okay. We'll do that in a moment. We can still save the document. I'm going to call this one Gallery, and notice that the Save As Template dialog is different from other dialogs, and you can see that there already is a template saved in this folder. So now we have our gallery.dwt, that stands for Dynamic Web Template file. Let's go ahead and give it a title. And let's start building the page by adding a few div tags. On a PC here, I can click and drag to add a div. Click if you're on a Mac. As I've mentioned before, it's common practice when you create a CSS layout to first create a div with an ID container that will contain everything else in your layout. So let's go ahead and create that. Inside my container div, I'm going to want 3 more divs. So let's insert the first one. By the way, you can use the tab key to move through these fields. And I'm going to call this one Header. Now just below it, just inserting my cursor below it, I'm going to create one called Main Content. And notice, even though the cursor looks like there's an extra space here, there really isn't. I'm right underneath that div as I create it. So when I create the third one now, for the footer of my page, it should be immediately underneath the other 2. So now I have a series of divs, one after another, and I'm going to use CSS to describe how these divs should appear on the page. First, let's go ahead and insert the banner in that header div tag. So inside this header div, I'm going to put the image that's the banner image for this page. So you want to make sure that your cursor is there. You can always double check here in the tag selector at the bottom of the page, or by opening split view and looking at the code. So let's just insert an image, In the Images folder, you'll find Galapagos Diving. That's the banner. Click OK. Of course, we need some alternate text. And now you see that my banner is inside the header div. Good time now to get rid of this holder content that Dreamweaver puts into place. Dreamweaver does that because if there's nothing in a div tag, it can be very hard to identify on a page because essentially it's not really there. Well, it is there, but it's not going to be visible in the Dreamweaver workspace except for this little dotted outline. And if there's nothing inside it, well, you get the idea. Without some kind of content, divs can be very hard to manipulate, very hard to identify on the page. Now in the main content area, I'm going to put the images and caption that I want in each of my gallery pages. So let's insert another image here just to have something and see how it's going to look. Let's go ahead and put that Darwin's Arch image. But for the alternate text this time, I'm just going to put photo because this is really just a holder image. I'm going to replace this in each of my gallery pages with a different image. So just for now, to have an image on the page, I'll insert that image and I'll use the alt text photo. Now at this point you may decide that's a little tight to have that image right up against there. So watch this. When I add a return to the bottom, Dreamweaver puts in a P tag that adds a little space above and below. And now I can put something simple like add caption here to distinguish that this is where the caption will go under the image. Finally, in the footer, I'm going to put information that will be the same on every page. So I could put my copyright information. And just to remind you, these photos are taken by my friend Ken Riddick, and he did generously let me use them in the series, but they are only for use as you're following along and using them in the series itself. So I add that copyright information at the bottom. Now I'm going to want that to be the same on every page. And I'm going to want this banner at the top to be the same on every page. But this photo in the middle is going to change, and that's why I just used the words add caption here in place of a caption. Let's just do a little cleanup now. And I often like to use split screen just to make sure that I'm really deleting exactly what I want. So I want to remove this holder text that's in the container div and before the header div. And I want to make sure to get all of it. So I'm going to select that P tag here in the tag selector and just choose Remove Tag. Now I'm going to delete the text by hitting the delete key, and I know I've gotten rid of everything that was there. Now I have my banner, that looks good. I have my image, that looks good. I do want a P tag around that. I want a P tag around my caption, have a little space around there. Now I've got my footer, just that in the footer div. I don't want anything else there. But at the very bottom, you can see I have an extra P tag. So again, I can delete this in the code, or I can right-click and use remove. But if you just want to delete it in the code where you can see it, when you click back in the design area, you'll see it disappears. So now I just need to do a little bit of formatting to get this designed the way I want. First of all, I've got a banner image that's 800 pixels wide, but you can see that this div tag, which has no style associated with it, is expanding to fit all of the available space. So let's create a few styles to control how this looks. We'll create a new style, ID style for container. Because I selected the container, Dreamweaver knows that's probably what I want to be doing. And for this one, I'm just going to create a box setting with the width of 800, and I'm going to center this in the page itself. And remember, the trick to centering a div on a page is to set the right and left margins to auto. So now you see this is centered on the page because the browser, or in this case, Dreamweaver mimicking a browser, is automatically putting an equal amount of margin space on each side of the div. Now for the footer, I'd like to have a background color. Let's align this to the right, and let's change the color of the text. Now I could create several different styles for this. I could have one style called copyright. I could have another style for the footer. But in this case, the most efficient option, I think, is to put all of that into one style. So I'm going to create a new style. All I want to do is create a footer style. So I'm just going to create an ID style that's just for the footer. Again, it's not incorrect to have that inside the container. It's just more specific than it needs to be. I like to keep my styles relatively simple. So I want to change the type in this. I'm going to give it a nice light gray color because I'm going to change the background to a dark blue. And I'm going to make the text kind of small. Like I said, I want to make the background a nice dark blue color. And I want that text to be aligned to the right. So let's use text align right. But when I do that, let me just apply that. And you can see now my text is all the way over to the right. I've got light colored text on a dark colored background. That all looks pretty good, except it's a little tight in there. I'd like to give it a little more breathing room. So let's go to Box, add a little bit of padding, maybe 5 pixels all the way around, and you see how easy it is to just add a little space around something like this. So very easy to create a simple footer with that spacing. Now there's one last thing I'm going to add. This clear setting enables you to make sure that this footer will never wrap up around something. If I aligned that image to the left and there was extra space, this footer might try to wrap up next to it. Unless I specify as part of the rule definition that I want to set clear to both. And what that's going to do is force this footer to always be below anything else on the page on both sides. As you get more advanced with CSS, you may use this clear option more and more, because you can clear everything to the left, you can clear everything to the right, or you can clear everything on both sides. And when you start to use floats in your designs, this becomes an especially important setting for controlling the positioning of things when you want one to stay underneath the others. The last style I'll create, and we'll be done with our little template here, is a style for the main content. So let's create a new, again, I'm going to create an ID style, and I'm going to have to retype it because Dreamweaver does remove it when I change it from content to ID. Make sure you type it exactly as you did when you created the div. So you want to make sure that this matches exactly what you created before. Now I have a couple of options here. If I use the block setting, I can use text align center, and I can center this right in the middle of the page. And you can see now my image is centered and the caption is centered underneath it. But what I really want is to have the caption aligned to the left of the image and have both things centered in the middle of the page. And there is a very easy way to do that. What I'm going to do for that is instead of aligning everything to the center, let me just remove that by deleting it. I'm going to go to the box setting and I'm going to use that right and left auto option again. So if I set an automatic amount of equal margin on the right and left, I will get the effect of centering. And if I set the width of this div to exactly the width of my photos, which in this case is 500 pixels, now when I click OK, you'll see the photo is centered, but the caption is going to be aligned right to the left of it. And I'd say we have a template and we're ready to use it to create some more pages. Save it. Don't worry about no editable regions. We'll do that in a moment. And we're ready to move on.